Most people think love begins the moment two eyes meet across a room, that it starts with a glance, a spark, a shared laugh, but that's only the surface. According to Carl Jung, love is never born in the conscious mind. It begins far deeper, in the hidden layers of our unconscious. Long before you fell in love, your psyche was already at work, reaching into the shadows of your childhood, your memories, your deepest unmet needs. Love in Jungian terms is never random. We are drawn to people not simply because of who they are, but because of what they unconsciously awaken in us. Some call it fate. Jung would call it a mirror, a reflection of something inside you that you haven't yet faced. Think about it. Why do certain people ignite something in you so instantly, while others leave you untouched, no matter how perfect they seem? It isn't logic, it isn't preference. It's something deeper, a pull from the soul. Jung believed that the people we fall in love with are not just companions, they are carriers of our projections. They hold the energy of our unhealed parts, our forgotten desires, and our symbolic opposites. We don't fall in love with a person. We fall in love with what they reflect back to us, and that reflection can feel divine or terrifying. Love, then, is a kind of psychological event, a soul-level phenomenon. It's your unconscious meeting theirs in the dark and whispering, "You see me." This is why love can feel so familiar, even when the person is new. Why certain encounters feel charged with meaning, like you've known them forever, or like they've come to awaken something long buried. It isn't just chemistry, it's a psychic activation, a collision of hidden archetypes, desires, and shadows. And unless we understand that, we remain blind to the forces actually guiding our hearts. So what if love isn't about who's right or who's wrong for you? What if love is about who activates what's unfinished in you? According to Jung, the unconscious is the true matchmaker. And until we explore what it's doing behind the scenes, we may never understand why we're drawn to certain people, or why those very people often hold the power to hurt us most. This video is about uncovering that hidden architecture, about the two real reasons people fall in love with you. Not the romanticized ones, but the psychologically real ones. Welcome to the truth beneath the illusion. Have you ever wondered why love can feel like magic, like destiny, like something far beyond your control? That's because in many ways it is. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious mind is constantly at work, not only shaping how we see ourselves, but also how we choose our lovers. Beneath our awareness, the psyche is searching for wholeness, and it tries to achieve that by seeking what it lacks in others. This is the essence of romantic magnetism. We're not just looking for a partner, we're looking for the parts of ourselves we've lost or repressed. We don't just fall in love. We are pulled into it, guided by the invisible threads of our own psychology. This is why the people we fall in love with often seem to complete us. Not because they are perfect, but because they awaken something we have forgotten how to access. Jung believed that within every person lives the anima, the feminine in a man, and the animus, the masculine in a woman. These archetypes remain largely unconscious, but we seek their reflection in our partners. That's why a person can seem inexplicably captivating. They embody something your psyche longs for. You see them, but you're really seeing a missing piece of you. But here's where things become complicated. What you're drawn to isn't always healthy, because the unconscious doesn't just carry your dreams, it also carries your wounds. If you grew up equating love with chaos, you may be drawn to those who repeat that dynamic. Not because you want pain, but because your psyche wants resolution. So love becomes a battleground between memory and desire. You're not just choosing them, you're choosing your story, hoping to rewrite it. But without awareness, we repeat it instead. This unconscious magnetism explains why love can feel both euphoric and tragic. Why we can't explain the pull, even when it hurts us. Jung taught that love is one of the most powerful projections of the unconscious. Until we face what's operating in the dark, we will keep falling in love with the same archetype wearing a different face. True freedom begins not in finding the right person, but in understanding why you were drawn to the wrong ones. And it starts by exploring the two hidden reasons people fall in love: for your light or for your shadow. People say love is mysterious, unpredictable, uncontrollable. But Jung would argue it's far more structured than we realize, because love often happens for two very specific psychological reasons. The first reason is attraction to the light in someone, the parts of them that reflect our ideal, our dreams, our highest aspirations. This is love based on projection of the persona, the mask of perfection we wear to face the world. We fall in love with someone's charm, intelligence, beauty, kindness. But what we're really drawn to is the version of ourselves we want to become. Their light calls to our potential, and when someone sees your light, praises it, and mirrors it back, it feels transcendent, like being truly seen. But is it really you they love or the image you project? The second reason is more complex and more dangerous. It's love based not on the light but on the shadow. That is, the repressed, wounded, hidden parts of your psyche. In this kind of love, someone unconsciously bonds with your pain, not always out of cruelty, but because your wounds match theirs. This kind of connection is magnetic because it speaks a language words cannot. It's two unhealed parts recognizing each other in silence. It feels deep, fated, consuming. But it's often the kind of love that burns. When someone falls in love with your shadow, they may not even realize they're connecting to your trauma, not your truth. And you may mistake intensity for intimacy, pain for passion. Most relationships contain elements of both types. Someone may be drawn to your brilliance and simultaneously entangled in your wounds. But the problem arises when either force dominates. When you're only loved for your light, you're placed on a pedestal. You're idealized but never truly known. You feel pressured to maintain the mask, to be the inspiration, to never fall apart. On the other hand, when someone only connects to your shadow, love can become codependency. They don't want your growth. They want your brokenness to match theirs. And deep down, this dynamic keeps both people trapped in familiar suffering. Jung believed that love is one of the most fertile grounds for psychological growth, because through it, our inner patterns become visible. The two hidden reasons people fall in love, for your light or for your shadow, are not mutually exclusive, but understanding which force is at play is vital. Ask yourself, do they love the version of you that shines for the world? Or do they seem connected to your sorrow, your chaos, your wounds? True love requires more than projection. It demands that we dissolve illusion and face the other as they truly are. Only then can love become real, not just a mirror, but a bridge between two whole selves. There is a moment, soft, quiet, almost imperceptible, when you begin to realize someone is falling for the most polished, glowing version of you. The way they look at you, speak about you, put you on a pedestal. They call you inspiring, admirable, different from the rest. And in that reflection, you feel seen. Or at least, you want to. But what they're really in love with is your persona, the mask you've crafted to survive and succeed. According to Jung, the persona is not fake. It's functional. It's how we adapt to the social world. Yet when someone only loves the light of your persona, they fall in love with what shines, not what struggles, and you begin to fear that if the mask ever slips, the love will too. This kind of love feels affirming at first. Someone finally sees your potential, your talent, your strength. But soon, it becomes a performance. You start choosing words more carefully. You smile even when you're tired. You give more than you want to, just to uphold the version of you they admire. You're not just being loved, you're being curated. And it feels fragile, like a glass house built on approval. Jung warned that the longer we live in our persona, the more we disconnect from our deeper self. And when love feeds only this surface, it can become emotionally hollow. You become adored but unknown, validated but invisible. What makes this kind of love so dangerous is that it's addictive. It fuels the ego. You feel powerful, chosen, safe in admiration. But secretly, you're terrified, because deep down, you know that the person they love isn't the full truth of who you are. They haven't seen the parts of you that break, The insecurity, the doubt, the chaos under control. So you hide it. You protect the image they love, even if it costs you your authenticity. And over time, the distance between who you are and who you pretend to be becomes unbearable. You begin to ask, if I stop shining, will they still stay? Real love can start in admiration, but it cannot survive there. To love someone's light is easy. It's safe, beautiful, aspirational. But to truly love someone, you must also see them when they dim. Jung would say that until the persona is stripped away, no real intimacy can form. The love that lasts is the love that sees beyond the mask. It notices when your eyes flicker with unspoken pain. It holds space not just for your strength, but for your softness. When someone loves your light, the relationship feels like an elevation. But only when they stay through your darkness does it become a sanctuary. Because being loved for your brilliance is not enough. Not if your brokenness feels like a threat to that love. There's a kind of love that doesn't seek your light. It's drawn instead to your scars, to your silence, to the places where you've broken and tried to heal alone. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or feel ashamed of. When someone loves your shadow, they aren't falling for the version of you the world applauds. They're falling for the version that whispers in the dark. It feels different from admiration. It feels like being understood without explanation. There's an eerie comfort in being seen where you usually hide. But this connection is as complex as it is intense. Because when love is rooted in shadow, it can heal you or entangle you. In shadow-based love, a person may be drawn to your pain because it mirrors their own. They sense your sadness without words. They feel safe in your chaos because it resembles their own inner world. There's a sense of recognition, like you've known each other in another life. But what's actually happening is a mirroring of wounds. And that resonance can feel like soul connection, but it might be trauma in disguise. You're not bonding in the light of who you're becoming. You're clinging to each other in the familiarity of unhealed hurt. It can feel magnetic, fated, but beneath it lies a question. Are you healing each other, or are you just avoiding healing alone? This type of love can be transformative, but only if both people are willing to face their darkness with awareness. If not, the relationship becomes a stage for unconscious repetition. You may find yourself reenacting old childhood patterns, trying to fix what was never fixed in the past. You may become so invested in being understood that you forget to grow. When someone loves your shadow but resists your evolution, they may try, often unconsciously, to keep you broken. Because your healing threatens the foundation of the bond. Jung warned that shadow relationships often feel mystical, but, if unexamined, they can imprison both souls in endless loops of pain dressed as passion. But when someone truly loves your shadow, not to possess it, not to bind you to it, but to honor it, something sacred happens. You begin to feel worthy, even in your mess. You feel safe to unravel, to fall apart, to speak what you've always silenced. This kind of love holds your shame without flinching. It doesn't flatter. It witnesses. And in that witnessing, healing begins. Jung believed that the integration of the shadow is the path to wholeness. And so, when someone sees your shadow and doesn't run, doesn't try to fix or flee, they offer a mirror not of perfection but of humanity. It's not always romantic, but it is always real, because true intimacy begins where the performance ends. When we meet someone and feel that sudden jolt, the inexplicable sense that we've known them forever, we're often stepping into the realm of projection. Carl Jung called projection one of the most dangerous but necessary functions of the unconscious. We don't just fall in love with people, we fall in love with the reflection of ourselves we see in them. In those first electrifying moments of connection, we're not encountering the other person's soul. We're encountering our own longings, our hidden wounds, our unmet needs, cast outward like a spell. It feels magical, it feels divine, but it's not the person we're loving. It's the fantasy we've unconsciously created from fragments of our inner world. Projection is the psyche's attempt to find itself in another. When you see someone as powerful, beautiful, nurturing, or mysterious, you may ask yourself, what part of me have I disowned that longs to return? We often project what we've lost touch with: our creativity, our confidence, our emotional depth. If we grew up suppressing certain traits to survive, we look for people who carry them effortlessly. This explains the strange attraction to opposites, not because opposites attract, but because they awaken forgotten parts of us. Love at first is often the beginning of remembering who we once were and who we still might become. But if we never become conscious of the projection, we stay trapped in illusion. Unconscious love quickly becomes fragile. Once the initial high fades, we begin to see the person more clearly. And often, we feel betrayed. Not because they changed, but because our fantasy is breaking down. We accuse them of not being the same, but the truth is they were never the person we imagined. That was our creation. Jung said that projection is like a veil. It protects us from seeing the truth until we are ready. But when that veil begins to lift, we are faced with a choice: confront the parts of ourselves we were outsourcing, or blame the other for not fulfilling the dream. This is the moment most relationships crumble, not from incompatibility, but from the collapse of unconscious ideals. Still, projection isn't inherently wrong. It's a necessary part of falling in love. It's how the soul signals what it's missing. The danger lies in mistaking the projection for the person. True intimacy begins when we gently take back our projections and when we say, "This quality I loved in you, it lives in me too." Love matures not by clinging to the image, but by seeing the human behind it. Jung believed the greatest act of love is to allow the other to be real, imperfect, evolving, separate. And in that space where fantasy fades and truth arises, something deeper than romance can begin. A soul encounter rooted not in illusion, but in conscious presence. There's a quiet tragedy that plays out in many relationships. You're deeply loved, intensely desired, but somehow you still feel unseen. The paradox: you're not being loved for who you are, but for who the other person thinks you are. What they see isn't your full self. It's a projection, a story, a sculpture shaped by their own unconscious needs and fantasies. And in that illusion, a kind of disconnection blooms. Jung wrote that we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. Love, too, is often just that: falling for the disguise, not the person beneath it. You become a mirror, a muse, a symbol, not a human being. And over time, this false connection begins to ache. To be loved for an image is to live in performance. You find yourself carefully curating how you show up, trying to preserve the version of you that they're attached to. Maybe it's the confident one, the healer, the mystery, the achiever. But slowly, you start to disappear behind the mask. It becomes harder to express needs, admit flaws, or just be ordinary, because the love you receive feels contingent on the role you play. This is not love rooted in reality, but in preservation of fantasy. You become afraid that if they truly saw your doubts, your darkness, your weariness, they'd walk away. And that fear becomes a cage, a gilded one, lined with affection, but still a prison. Many people unknowingly fall in love with their own unconscious material. They're not relating to you. They're relating to what you represent. You remind them of someone they lost, or someone they hoped to become, or the parent they wished had loved them differently. You trigger an ancient story in their psyche, and in doing so, you become sacred, not for who you are, but for the archetype you activate. Jung saw these projections as deeply spiritual but potentially dangerous. Because when reality inevitably conflicts with fantasy, disillusionment sets in. The fall from the pedestal can be cruel. And the person once obsessed with you can become cold, even resentful, not because you changed, but because their illusion died. The deepest human hunger isn't just to be admired, it's to be known, seen in our wholeness, even the parts we're still learning to accept. Real love begins when we dare to remove the mask, even if it means losing the pedestal. When we say, I'm not just what you hoped I'd be, I'm complex, I'm healing, I'm real, and the person doesn't flinch, that is love without illusion. Jung believed that only when projection is withdrawn can true relationship begin. Until then, we're not loving them, and they're not loving us. We're loving reflections, ghosts, dreams. And in that space, no matter how intense the bond, we remain alone. To be truly loved, we must first risk being truly seen. There's a peculiar type of love that feels like home from the very beginning. You meet someone and there's instant familiarity, as if your soul already knows theirs. It's warm, magnetic, comforting. But as the relationship unfolds, something darker emerges. The very same person who makes you feel safe also brings you pain. Not because they are cruel, but because they touch wounds that have never fully healed. Jung understood this strange contradiction. He taught that what we call home is often a psychological echo, not of belonging, but of what we survived. When we say someone feels like home, we may unconsciously mean they feel like what I've always known, even if what I've known is suffering. We are all shaped by early relational patterns. If love in childhood was conditional, distant, or intertwined with pain, we internalize it as normal. So later, when we meet someone who evokes the same emotional texture, we interpret the familiarity as destiny. I feel so comfortable with them, we say. But it's not always comfort, and sometimes it's repetition. Sometimes it's the psyche's attempt to recreate the original wound in hopes of a different ending. That's why some of the most intoxicating loves are also the most wounding. They reopen trauma disguised as romance. Jung believed this was the unconscious attempting to self-heal by attracting what hurt us, so we could finally face it consciously. But the danger is this. If we don't become conscious of the pattern, we re-enter the same emotional loops. We justify red flags because the connection feels so intense. We ignore our needs because we fear breaking the bond. We tell ourselves this is love, even as we abandon ourselves to maintain it. In Jungian terms, we are not in a relationship with the person. We are in a relationship with our past. The other becomes a character in our unresolved inner drama. And unless we awaken to this truth, we risk confusing emotional familiarity with spiritual alignment. Not every soul you recognize is meant to stay. Some are there to show you what you still need to heal. The lesson in these relationships isn't always to hold on. Sometimes, it's to wake up. To ask, why does this feel like home? What kind of home did I come from? And is the love I'm accepting the love I truly deserve, or just the one I've been conditioned to expect? Real love may feel unfamiliar at first. It might feel calm instead of chaotic, gentle instead of overwhelming. That's because true safety is often not what we're used to. Healing begins when we recognize that not everything that feels like home is good for us. Sometimes, growth requires walking away from the comfort of the known and into the discomfort of what is truly healthy. In that courage, we begin to write a new story, one where love doesn't have to hurt to feel real. There's a moment in some connections that feels electric, a sense of knowing someone deeply, instantly, as if your soul has met theirs before. People call it many things: soulmates, twin flames, destiny. And sometimes it is exactly that, a recognition of something sacred and real. But Jung would urge us to ask, is it truly the soul that's recognizing the other, or is it our trauma speaking? Emotional intensity can often masquerade as depth. The body responds, the heart races, and the mind romanticizes. But intensity alone doesn't equal truth. Trauma bonds, too, can feel like fate. They are built not on love, but on survival, on shared wounds, not shared wholeness. The nervous system recognizes danger as familiar and mistakes it for chemistry. Trauma bonds often arise from unresolved pain. When two people meet with complementary wounds, abandonment, neglect, emotional volatility, they can unconsciously recreate a dynamic that mimics the past. The bond becomes addictive. There's euphoria followed by devastation, push and pull, highs and lows. You feel like you can't live without them. yet the relationship drains you. And yet you stay because leaving feels like abandoning something ancient, sacred. But this is the trap. The emotional charge of a trauma bond feels like depth, because it activates our most primal survival responses. What we're calling soul recognition may, in fact, be the unconscious attempting to resolve unfinished emotional business. So how do you tell the difference between a soul recognition and a trauma bond? Start with this question. Does this connection bring peace, or does it keep you in a state of emotional volatility? True soul connections expand you. They may challenge you, but they don't deplete you. There is room to be both vulnerable and safe. A trauma bond, on the other hand, often thrives on chaos. The love feels conditional. You walk on eggshells. Your sense of self erodes over time. Jung believed that the unconscious seeks healing, but until we bring awareness to our patterns, we'll reenact them in the people we choose. Love should awaken, not re-traumatize. It should make you more of who you are, not less. The truth is, many of us confuse love with intensity because we've never experienced safety as passion. We equate suffering with depth and chaos with connection. But soul recognition is quiet. It's stable. It doesn't scream or rush or demand. It sees you, not your wounds, not your performance, but the core of who you are. And when you're seen like that, you don't feel high. You feel calm. That's the difference. It's not about fireworks. It's about alignment. If you want to know if a love is real, ask yourself, do I feel more myself in this relationship or less? The answer won't come from the heart alone. It will come from the soul. And the soul always knows the difference between being activated and being truly loved. Most of what we call falling in love is, at first, a projection. Carl Jung warned that we do not see others as they are. We see them as we are. We cast our unlived desires, our fantasies, our unresolved wounds onto the person standing in front of us. We see their smile and imagine safety. We notice their silence and imagine mystery. We take fragments of the other person and weave an entire mythology around them. This is not love. It is projection. And while projection is not inherently wrong when it's a natural human process, the danger lies in mistaking it for the real thing. In the beginning, we're not loving the person. We're loving the part of ourselves we've disowned, now visible in another. Projection is seductive because it feels like recognition. You think, finally someone who sees me. But what's really happening is the opposite. You are seeing them through a lens clouded by your inner world. You're projecting your lost innocence, your unmet needs, your yearning to be rescued, onto someone who likely has their own shadows and blind spots. Over time, reality breaks through. The image shatters. You realize they are not the savior, the perfect match, the fantasy. They are human, flawed, complex. And this is where most relationships die, at the death of the projection. But it is also where real love, the kind that transforms you, can finally begin. If both people are willing to stay, see each other fully, and grow together. True love isn't the intoxication of being seen as ideal. It's the quiet power of being seen as real. And this only happens when we stop expecting the other person to complete us. Jung believed that wholeness is an inner journey, not something we outsource to a partner. When we expect another person to fill the void within us, we burden them with an impossible task. Love becomes fragile, demanding, conditional. But when we reclaim our projections, when we see the other not as fantasy, but as they truly are, we create the space for real intimacy, not just closeness, but deep soul-level recognition. The kind that says, I see your light, I see your shadow, and I choose you anyway. The end of projection is not the end of romance. It's the beginning of conscious love. A love that no longer relies on illusion to survive. A love that embraces the other person as they are, not as we wish them to be. And this kind of love is rare. Not because it's impossible, but because it requires courage. The courage to confront our own shadows. the courage to love without possession, the courage to stay when things aren't magical but meaningful. Jung teaches us that what we reject in ourselves, we seek in others, but what we integrate, we can share. And when two people come together, not to complete each other, but to witness and support each other's wholeness, that's not just love, that's transformation. Many of us spend our lives chasing the feeling of being loved, but few of us ask why we long for it so desperately. According to Jung, this longing is often a signal from the unconscious, not a call to be adored, but a call to become whole. Love becomes addictive when it serves as a substitute for self-integration. We believe that being chosen will fix the ache inside, that being seen will erase the pain of having ignored ourselves for so long. But no amount of external validation can replace the inner task of bringing our fragmented psyche into harmony. The soul doesn't crave admiration, it craves integration. And until we begin to reclaim our disowned pieces, we will keep falling for people who reflect them back, confusing resonance with romance and magnetism with meaning. Integration is not about fixing ourselves. It's about remembering who we are beneath the layers of masks and wounds. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming whole, not perfect, not pleasing, but real. When you live only from your persona, the curated self, love becomes performance. You show only what you think will be accepted and suppress what might threaten the connection. But true intimacy, with another and with yourself, can only emerge when the shadow is welcomed into the light. Love is not meant to validate our masks, it's meant to challenge them. The relationships that break us open often do so to show us what's missing within, and what's missing is never in the other. It's in the part of ourselves we've abandoned in order to be lovable. This is why the journey of love in its truest form is the journey back to self, not the idealized self, but the integrated one, the self who knows their darkness and walks with it, who holds their wounds without shame. When we begin to integrate, something radical happens. We no longer need others to carry our pain or our light. We can meet them as equals, not as saviors or mirrors. And in that meeting, love transforms from a transaction into a sacred exchange, from need into choice, from fear into trust. The more we integrate, the less we chase. The more we embody our own wholeness, the more we draw to us relationships that reflect that same depth. Love then becomes not a rescue mission, but a dance between two people who have rescued themselves. In the end, the deepest call of love is not to be desired. It is to be authentic, to drop the roles, the projections, the performance, and to stand as we are, whole, messy, human. Jung's work reminds us that the path to wholeness is not linear nor easy, but it is essential. Because when we are whole, we are no longer starved. For love, we are ready to give it. From fullness, not emptiness. From presence, not desperation. And that kind of love, grounded in integration, forged through self-awareness, free of illusion, is not only rare, it's revolutionary. Not just a feeling, but a force. One that doesn't just change relationships, it changes lives. As we've explored through these 10 profound topics, love is far more complex and mysterious than the simple stories we tell ourselves. It is not merely about attraction or companionship, but a deep unconscious dance between light and shadow, projection and reality, yearning and integration. The love we often seek is entangled with parts of ourselves we haven't yet met or accepted, wounds, fears, hopes, and dreams buried beneath the surface. Carl Jung teaches us that every relationship, especially those that stir our deepest emotions, is an invitation to journey inward, to face what we hide, and to grow beyond what limits us. True love calls us to a radical honesty, with ourselves and with others. It asks us to shed illusions, to confront pain without running, and to embrace the fullness of our humanity. This means recognizing when we are loved not for who we really are, but for projections we carry or wounds we share. It means daring to be vulnerable even when it feels unsafe, trusting that the soul's craving for wholeness is stronger than the ego's need for control. The path to authentic connection is never easy, but it is the only way to break the cycles of repeating hurt and disappointment. When we stop chasing love as an escape or validation and instead answer the call to integrate our fragmented selves, we open the door to relationships that nourish and sustain us. This integration frees us from unconscious patterns, allowing love to be a mirror that reflects our truth rather than a mask that conceals it. We become lovers not only of others, but of ourselves, flawed, whole, and beautifully human. And, in this transformation, we discover that the deepest love we can ever receive is the love we cultivate within. So let this be a gentle reminder. Love is not a destination or prize, but a sacred process of becoming. As you navigate your relationships and your inner world, remember that the work is never just about finding someone to love you. It's about finding the courage to love all parts of yourself. This is where real freedom, healing, and profound connection begin. In the words of Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And in that becoming, love becomes not just possible but inevitable.